Welcome! This time on Woodworks, we're going to build this elegantly curved mahogany headboard. Hi, I'm D.Marks. Welcome to Woodworks. This contemporary headboard is designed for a queen-size bed, and it features sections of mahogany joined together in a graceful curve. The sculpted frame combines style and strength and gently curves around the mahogany plywood back panel. The tapered legs are spanned by solid mahogany rails, and the potassium dichromate finish adds depth and deep, rich tones to the wood. Whenever you're working on a project of this size with large sweeping curves, it's always a good idea to make a full-scale mock-up. Now, for the design of our headboard, we're working off of a queen-size mattress. And for our mock-up, we're using some 1/8" MDF. This stuff works really well to give us a full-scale sense of the design. It's stiffer than paper, but as you can see, it's not stiff enough for our template. So for our template, we're using this material. This is some 1/2" MDF. Now what we'll do is just slide our mock-up into place and transfer the lines onto our 1/2" MDF. Then we can cut this out and create a template that we'll use to make our headboard. Now whenever you create a mock-up, it's not necessarily going to come out symmetrical. So in order to make a template that's symmetrical, we start out by drawing out our lines, and then we flip it and trace out our lines again, and this will give us 2 sets of symmetrical curves, and we can just choose the ones we like. Now this is how we generated the curves for our mock-up to begin with, just in case you were wondering how we did that. We used a thin strip of wood clamped to a couple of bricks, which serve as an extra pair of hands. That's always useful in the wood shop. Now the beauty of this simple approach is that we have the freedom to clamp this into any position that we want and design a beautiful curve that's really pleasing to our eye. We cut our template from the 1/2" MDF with a jigsaw. Then, clean up the edges with a pattern maker's rasp. We finished making our template and got the edges nice and smooth with our pattern maker's rasp. Now we've positioned it onto our mahogany stock so we can trace out our profile. Now this mahogany stock started out as one long board so we could grain match the individual sections. We made some bevel cuts on the ends of these 1 3/4" pieces of mahogany, and that way we could get it to match the outline of our headboard. After we put our stock in place, we take a pencil and trace out the shape from our template. It's really important to mark out these sections, called dog ears, in other words, some extra stock, on the ends of each piece for our clamps to hold on to. When we do our glue up, the dog ears will help pull these joints in nice and snug. Before we cut the frame sections, first we'll make the joinery that will hold them together. To join the members of our frame, we're using a spline joint. Now the way it works is like this. We've got a slot cutting bit set up in the router table. We cut a couple of dados into our end grain. Now the joint itself looks like this. We've got 2 splines which fit snugly into our dados, and on the frame they look like this. After our frame has been shaped into this nice curve, you can see that these 2 splines are exposed, and that's part of the intended design. After we've cut the slots, we use the bandsaw to rough cut the sections, including our dog ears, that will make up the top curve of our headboard. We also cut out the dog ears on the 2 straight pieces that we'll use to make the legs that attach to our top curve. We finished cutting out our stock on the bandsaw, and now we're ready to clean up this inside edge of our legs so we can get them ready to do their joinery. Now to do that, we use the router with the 2-part router bit system. We've got 2 bits, one with the bearing at the top and another bit with the bearing at the bottom. Now we'll use this bit with the bearing at the top, and that bearing will follow along the straight edge. We'll make a cut about halfway down. After we're through with that, we'll flip the leg over, and then we'll use the second bit with the bearing at the bottom. The first bit cuts a smooth surface, using the straight edge as a template. Then, the bearing on the bottom of the second bit uses that smooth surface as a guide, cleaning up the top half of the leg. You can learn more about making this headboard by checking out our website at DIYnet.com.
Coming up, tips on making strong joints for curved wood.
Welcome back. For this project, we're making a beautiful contemporary headboard. We've made the template for our headboard and cut the mahogany stock for our frame. Next, we'll finish making our joinery. Our splines are exposed, so we need to make them out of mahogany to match our bed frame. Now first, we started by measuring our slots, and then we went to the bandsaw and resawed some stock. Then we took that stock to the drum sander and then sanded it down to thickness. After that, we went to the table saw and cut them to length. And that produced these splines. Now we've dry clamped the individual pieces of our frame together, and that way we could check out and make sure that our joints fit really well. Now it's important to make sure that the grain of our splines runs parallel to the grain of our frame. That way when we do our glue up, we'll be gluing up long grain to long grain, and that will make for a really strong joint. For the best results, we glue the pieces in pairs. Clamp them flat and let them dry. Then we glue the pairs together. A curved piece like this needs good, strong joints, and the dog ears help by providing solid surfaces so we can apply firm clamping pressure while the glue dries. While the glue is drying on the top of our bed frame, we've taken our leg stock and dry clamped it into position. Now this gives us a good opportunity to take the measurements for the rails that will run between our legs. Also, as long as we're here, it's a good time to lay out for the mortises that will join our rails to our legs. Before we make our mortises, first we cut to size some mahogany stock that we've jointed in plane for our rails. To connect our rails to our legs, we're going to use a mortise and loose tenon construction. Now you can see on our prototype leg, we've got two mortises, and these are a pretty good sized mortise. Now on our rail, we're going to route a matching sized mortise. And to connect the two, we're going to use these jumbo sized tenons. Now to cut the mortises, we use the multi-router. Now one of the advantages of this tool is that if you're using extra long stock like our rails, you can easily clamp it to the work table and it'll float in and out on these linear motion bearings. First, we make the mortises on the ends of both our rails. For the legs, we keep the setting the same for the size of the mortises and just change the position of the leg stock to make the two mortises we need in each leg. At the router table, we soften the edges of our rails with an 1/8 inch radius bit. And do the same on the inside edges of the legs. This is our tenon stock that will join our rails to our legs on our headboard. Now earlier, we resawed this to thickness on the bandsaw, and then we went over to the drum sander and sanded it down to its final dimension. Now we just got done using a 1/4 inch radius bit on the router table, and that rounded these edges, and it'll give us a rounded profile that'll match the rounded profile of our mortises. To finish the process, we cut our tenons to length on the table saw. Next, we take our tenons and use them to glue up the legs and rails for the bottom of our headboard. By this time, the curved top of our headboard is already dry. Now that we've glued our rails to our legs, but before the glue is set, we'll take this whole bottom portion of our assembly and glue it to the top portion of our curved bed frame. That way, we still have some time to put the whole thing together and dial it in and get it adjusted just right before the glue sets. We want to make sure that the joints are solid and the legs are straight and even. That way, when the glue dries, our headboard will rest flat on the floor and stand upright.
Coming up, using power tools to shape a graceful curve into our headboard.
Welcome back. For this project, we're making a beautiful contemporary headboard. We've made the rails for our headboard and glued the assembly together. Now we're ready to cut out the curves. Our glue has had several hours to set, and now that it's all dry, we can pull this clamp off of our last joint. Now these dog ears have served us really well in terms of pulling these joints together nice and snug. But now that our whole bed frame is assembled, we don't need them any longer. So we'll take our jigsaw, we'll follow along these curves along the inside and outside of our bed frame. We'll trim off these dog ears, and while we're at it, we'll trim off these excess splines as well. We're sliding our 1/2-inch template into position on our mahogany headboard. Now this next step is really crucial, because once we have this all aligned, we're going to use the template to create the exact profile for our headboard. Now we'll do this by using a router with a flush bearing bit, and this particular bit has the bearing at the top. So the way it works is like this. The bearing is going to run up against the inside of our template, and the cutter will trim away this excess mahogany, matching the profile of our template exactly. Again, this process will take 2 steps. As the first bit follows the template, we'll cut about halfway down the stock, making a smooth curve. Then, after flipping the headboard, we install the second bit with the bearing on the bottom. That bit will use the smooth curve as a guide as it cleans up the rest of the headboard. We've taken our handheld router and installed a 1/2-inch rabbiting bit in it. Now that we have a nice, smooth, curved profile for our headboard, we'll use that rabbiting bit to cut out a 1/2-inch by 1/2-inch rabbet that our plywood panel will set into later on. We make the rabbet in the back of the curve as well as the back of the top rail. That will give our panel a lot of support. The rabbiting bit leaves rounded corners, so next we'll use a chisel to square up the corners. That'll help make a snug fit for our back panel. We've got our rabbet cut out and our corners are chiseled square. Now we'll take our headboard and set it down onto our mahogany plywood panel. What we're looking for here is to reference the straight edge of the plywood up against the straight edge of the rabbet. So pull this in snug. Now we'll take our pencil and we'll just strike a line here, and this will give us the curved shape of our rabbet onto our mahogany plywood panel. Then we can come back with a jigsaw and cut it out. we're using our pattern maker's rasp to finish shaping our plywood panel. Let's check the fit. Drops in there nicely. All right, looks good.
Coming up, using hand tools to add a shapely finish to our headboard.
Welcome back. We're making this curved mahogany headboard, and we've only got a few more steps to go. For more information about building this headboard, go to our website at DIYnet.com. We cut out our frame and made the back panel. Next, we'll create an elegant profile for our headboard. We've already created the exact profile for our headboard. Now we'll get into some of the really exciting stuff, which is to create the three-dimensional shaping for our headboard. To start, we use a router with a 3/4 inch radius bit. And what that'll do is knock off these sharp edges and just give us the beginning of our oval shape. Once we've rounded one side of our headboard, we flip it and make a second pass with the radius bit to get a matching rounded shape on the other side. We use the router to knock off the outside edges of our frame. Now we need to shape this inside 3/4 inch radius and blend it down into the 1/8 inch radius on the inside edge of our leg. To do that, we're using this number 49 pattern maker's rasp, and this works really well for doing this type of stuff. Now, a lot of woodworkers find this part of the process to be really relaxing and enjoyable. After we get done with this, we use some more hand tools to finish off the rest of the frame and create sort of a tapered oval shape. A combination of hand tools works best in this situation. A Japanese scraping plane, a microplane, and a hand scraper all help to smooth the contour. After some hand sanding, we're ready to put on the finish. For our finish, we're using potassium dichromate. Now, potassium dichromate, brushed onto mahogany, gives the wood a deep, dark, rich, chocolatey color. Now, it's actually an orange-colored crystal that dissolves in water. So it's important to know that whenever you're using any type of water-based dye or water-based chemical, that is going to raise the grain of the wood. Now, earlier we dealt with this by wetting the wood with some water, and then when it dried, we sanded it smooth. Now, it's also important to know that potassium dichromate is a toxic chemical, so it's advisable to read the labels and follow all the safety precautions. It will take several thin coats of dye to get the rich color we're looking for. Once the potassium dichromate has had time to dry, you might want to try some tung oil to produce a warm hand-rub finish. Here's our trim that we made out of some thin strips of mahogany, and this will cover up the back of the headboard. We've dyed it and finished it to match the rest of the headboard. So now all we need to do is put some glue into our rabbet. We'll put some glue onto the edge of our plywood panel. Then we'll slide this into position, attach our trim, and our mahogany headboard will be complete. The contemporary design of the headboard exhibits understated elegance. The exposed spline joinery adds strength and subtle visual accents, and the finish warms the figure of the wood in the frame and back panel. This headboard would be a graceful addition to any bedroom. We're just tightening up the last screw on our headboard. And our headboard really turned out to be a handsome piece. Now, for maintenance, all you need is a couple of drops of lemon oil and a soft cloth, and that'll get rid of the dust that occurs on the piece and maintain the rich glow of the wood. I'm D.Marks. We'll see you right here next time on Woodworks.